My parents sold their house and handed over $470,000 to my brother, then tried to take over my home like they owned the place, until what I did next left them completely stunned. I'm a 38-year-old guy, and I've been married to my wife Melissa for 6 years. She's an architect, super smart, makes good money, and works hard at her job. I run a custom furniture business I built from scratch with my own hands. I own 2 houses. The one we live in is nice, nothing super fancy but cozy and comfortable. The second house I bought about 3 years ago as an investment property. It's a smaller place, and I rent it out to this young couple, Tyler and Lauren. They pay their rent on time every month, never cause any trouble, basically perfect tenants. Now, here's where my family comes into the picture. My parents had 2 kids, me and my younger brother Adrian, who's 35. And I swear to God, this guy has never held a real job in his entire adult life. I'm serious. Since graduating college, paid for by my parents, of course, he's been bouncing from one ridiculous business venture to another, and each time it ends up costing my parents a ton of money. Meanwhile, me? When I wanted to start my own business, did I get a dime of family money? Hell no. My dad actually told me it was too risky and that I should focus on getting a stable job with benefits instead. But when Adrian announced he was an entrepreneur, suddenly it was all about supporting his dream and believing in his potential. Fast forward to today. Adrian is engaged to this woman Clara. Let's just say she has expensive taste and zero clue where money really comes from. She's always wearing new clothes, jetting off somewhere, constantly talking about their luxury lifestyle. And do they have high-paying jobs? Great question, I have no idea. From what I can tell, Adrian is currently between ventures again, which means he's living off my parents' generosity while he explores new opportunities. Clara doesn't work either, she's focusing on wedding planning and building her social media brand, posting selfies and makeup tutorials for her 847 followers on Instagram. Here's where everything started going downhill. About 3 months ago, my parents called me super excited. They had decided to sell the family house. This is the house they've owned for 30 years, bought right after my dad started his job at the power company. Nice place, good neighborhood, probably worth around $470,000 these days. I figured they were finally ready to downsize, maybe move into one of those retirement communities for folks over 55, something easier to maintain now that they're in their late 60s. Made sense to me. So I'm on the phone with my mom, and she's rambling about getting a good price and how excited they are about this new chapter in their lives. I was genuinely happy for them, they worked so hard all their lives, they totally deserve to enjoy retirement. Then she drops the bomb, they gave all the money from selling the house to Adrian as a wedding gift. I sat there, thinking I must have misheard her. Wait, what? All of it? The entire $470,000. She said they wanted to help Adrian start his new life with Clara by giving him that money. I started doing quick math in my head. If Adrian found this fancy penthouse downtown that costs more than $470,000, where did my parents think they'd live after giving away all their savings? Turns out, Adrian bought this $1.3 million penthouse in the trendy part of downtown, a glass tower with a concierge and all the bells and whistles, and my parents gave him their entire life savings as a down payment, planning to finance the rest. On what income? Still a question nobody seemed to be asking. I asked my mom point blank, "What about your retirement?" She cheerfully replied, "Oh, we've got it all figured out." And just like that, they announced they were moving into my rental house without even discussing it with me or my tenants. Just a straightforward plan, they'd take over my investment property because they needed somewhere to live after giving away their savings to fund Adrian's luxury lifestyle. When I asked if they'd talked to Tyler and Lauren about leaving, she said it wasn't necessary, they could just tell them to move out, breaking their lease and leaving them high and dry, two tenants who've never done anything wrong, just because my parents decided to use their life savings to support Adrian's dreams. The entitlement was staggering. They made this huge financial decision without consulting anyone, handed over all their security to fund Adrian's lavish life, and then just assumed I'd fix everything by kicking out my tenants and losing rental income. When I told them that wasn't happening, my dad's voice turned icy quick. "We raised you, Brandon. This is what family does for each other." Yeah. Family, the same family that paid for Adrian's college but didn't help me out. The same family that financed his failed businesses while telling me to be more realistic about my goals. The same family that handed him $500,000 while expecting me to provide free housing. I told them I'd call back later and hung up the phone. Melissa was standing right there in the kitchen doorway as I did. I'd heard enough of the conversation to understand what was going on. "Please tell me you're not seriously considering this," she said. "Not for a second." But I knew this was just the start of something much bigger. My parents don't take no for an answer, especially when they feel entitled to something. And clearly, they believed they had a claim to my rental property. I had no idea how nasty things were about to get. I was at the workshop last Tuesday when my phone started blowing up with calls. Tyler was ringing me. I almost didn't pick up because I was trying to focus, but something told me to answer. "Brandon, we need help. There are people at our front door claiming they own this house." My stomach sank right away. "What do you mean claiming ownership?" "They've got suitcases and they're banging on the door, telling us we have to pack up and leave. The woman is yelling that this house is theirs now and we're trespassing." I already knew who it was, but I asked anyway. "Did they give you names?" "They said they're your parents." "Of course they did." I told Tyler not to open the door under any circumstances and that I was coming right over. I dropped everything, didn't even turn off the Sanders, just grabbed my keys and rushed out across town. The drive there felt surreal. I kept thinking maybe it was some kind of misunderstanding, maybe they were just confused about something. But deep down, I knew exactly what was happening. My parents had decided that since I wouldn't give up my rental property willingly, they'd just take it by force. When I pulled up to the house, sure enough, there was my mom and dad on the porch with 2 big suitcases and a bunch of shopping bags. My mom was pounding on the door with her fist, while my dad stood there looking all serious, like he was the landlord showing up to collect rent. "This is ridiculous," my mom yelled. "We know you're inside. Open this door right now." I could see Tyler and Lauren's curtains twitching from inside. They're probably scared stiff but smart enough not to answer. When my parents saw me coming, my mom immediately shifted from angry to relieved. "Brandon, thank goodness you're here. These people refuse to leave." "Mom, what are you doing?" "We're moving in. We told you we needed somewhere to stay, and I told you that wasn't happening." My dad stepped forward with that stern look he used to give me when I was a kid. "Son, we've been staying at the Extended Stay America for 2 weeks waiting for you to handle this situation. 2 weeks stuck in a hotel instead of, I don't know, looking for an apartment or calling a realtor or doing anything responsible adults do when they need a place to live. You've been living at a hotel because you decided to sell your house and give away the money," I said. "That's not my problem to fix. We're your parents, and they're my tenants with a legal lease agreement." That's when my mom completely lost it, started yelling about how ungrateful I was and how they sacrificed everything for their children, how a good son would take care of his parents. The whole neighborhood could hear her screaming. My dad tried a different approach. "Look, we already gave notice at the hotel. Our checkout is today, and we have nowhere else to go. Notice how that was supposed to be my emergency. They'd painted themselves into a corner and were expecting me to fix it by screwing over innocent people." Tyler cracked the door just enough to stick his head out. "Is everything okay? Should we call someone?" I told him everything's fine. "My parents are leaving." "We're not leaving," my mom shrieked. "This is family property." That's when I snapped. "This is my property. I bought it with my own money from the business I built from scratch, no help from either of you." My dad started guilt-tripping me then. "After all we did for you. What exactly did you do for me, Dad?" Because I'm having a hard time recalling all this supposed help you're talking about. He got flustered and started stammering about how he raised me and provided for me. I cut him off. You provided the legal minimum required to avoid jail for neglecting your kid. Meanwhile, you're financing Adrian's penthouse lifestyle while demanding I give you free housing? That's rich. My mom was crying now, playing the victim like she always does. Where are we supposed to go? Anywhere but my rental property, apparently. The whole thing was nuts. They created this mess themselves, ignored every reasonable solution, and now they were trying to force me into fixing it by ruining my relationships with good tenants. Tyler spoke up again. Should I call the police? Both of my parents spun around and looked at him like he'd suggested calling in an airstrike. You wouldn't dare involve the police in family matters, my dad said. He absolutely would, I replied. And so would I. You're trespassing now. That's when things really started to get ugly. My mom started yelling at me, accusing me of choosing strangers over family, saying she was ashamed to have raised such a selfish son, and claiming that my late grandmother would be turning in her grave if she knew. My dad immediately took it up a notch. He insisted that your brother would never treat us this way. You're right, I told him. My brother would just take your money and leave you living out of your car. At least I'm being honest about saying no, I added. Then I turned to Tyler. If they're not off this property within 5 minutes, call 911, I said. My dad muttered that this wasn't over as he grabbed one of the suitcases. They hurriedly packed their things and loaded back into their car, my mom crying the entire time about how terrible a son I was. The last thing I heard before they drove off was my dad shouting that I'd regret this decision someday. After they left, I apologized to Tyler and Lauren for all the chaos. Turns out they'd been hiding in their bedroom for about 20 minutes, genuinely terrified that these crazy people were going to break down the door. I handed them my direct cell number and told them to call me immediately if my parents showed up again. I also told them I'd understand if they wanted to break their lease early because of this harassment. Still, I knew my parents weren't done yet. People who think they're entitled to your property don't just give up after one no, they push harder. I didn't realize how far they were willing to go until the next day when my phone started ringing non-stop, like every hour on the hour. Different numbers, different relatives, all with basically the same message: I'm a terrible son abandoning my parents. The first call was from my Aunt Linda at 7 a.m., and I was barely awake, coffee still brewing, and she was already lecturing me about family values and respecting elders. She claimed my parents had called her crying, saying how ungrateful I was for leaving them homeless. Brandon, how could you do this to them? They're your parents, she said. I tried to explain the whole situation, but she cut me off immediately. I don't want to hear excuses, she snapped. Just find a way to help them. Then she hung up. An hour later, my cousin Gavin rang me up. I hadn't spoken to this guy in probably 3 years, but suddenly he's super concerned about what kind of person I am. Same old story, how could I abandon family? What kind of person chooses money over parents? They raised you, man, you owe them something. I told him that my brother had their money now. That's different, he argued. How is it different? I asked back. And then, click, another hang-up. This cycle kept repeating all day long. By noon, I'd received 8 phone calls and probably 15 texts. The worst part was the texts. They were long guilt trips about loyalty to family, how my parents sacrificed everything for their kids, and how I was breaking their hearts. My phone kept buzzing every few minutes with messages from more relatives who seemed to be part of this campaign too. What really got to me was that none of them even asked for my side of things or tried to understand what actually happened. They just believed my parents' version and instantly made me the bad guy. My cousin Renee sent me this long message on Facebook about how my parents were practically living like refugees in a hotel and asked how I could sleep at night knowing they were suffering, living like refugees because they sold their house and gave away the money. As I read it, I thought, Where were all these strong family values when my parents were paying Adrian's bills for the past 15 years? Where was all this concern when I was working 3 jobs just to pay for college? And here's what really pissed me off, the worst part, none of these so-called family members offered to actually help my parents themselves. They had all these opinions about what I should do, but somehow none of them had any spare bedrooms or guest houses available. When I mentioned this to Aunt Linda during her second call of the day, she got flustered. "Well, we don't have the space," she said. "You do," I pointed out. "I don't have space either, that's why I rent it out." That's when it hit me, the real reason was clear, because I'd worked hard to build a successful business, I was somehow obligated to fix everyone else's problems. Because I'd managed my money responsibly, I was expected to subsidize everyone's bad choices. By Wednesday night, I'd had enough. I sat down and spent about 2 hours writing the most detailed email of my life, got it just right, clear, factual, impossible to misinterpret. The subject line was, "Setting the record straight, the full story." I laid out the timeline. My parents sold their house for $470,000, they gave all that money to Adrian for a penthouse down payment, then they announced they'd be moving into my rental property without asking me first. I explained that I said no and offered to help them find suitable housing instead. They refused and demanded I evict my legal tenants. Then I attached proof, screenshots of text messages, photos of the lease agreement, even property records showing when I bought the place and how much I paid for it. I wanted everyone to see exactly what they'd been asking me to do. The email was probably around 2,000 words long. I went through every point carefully, but the most important part was at the end. I listed every person who had called or texted me about family duties and obligations. Then I wrote, "Since everyone seems so worried about my parents' housing situation, I'm sure one of you would be glad to give them a place to stay. After all, family helps family, right? Please let me know your move-in date for Mom and Dad so I can pass along their new address." I hit send at 11 p.m. on Wednesday night to 30 people. By Thursday morning, my phone was completely silent. For the first time in 3 days, I wasn't woken up by angry relatives. By midday, responses started coming in. They mainly fell into 3 groups: folks who suddenly remembered they didn't really have space after all, people who went completely quiet, and others who doubled down and got even nastier. Uncle Frank was in the 3rd group. He sent me a long reply about how I was destroying the family and turning my back on those who made me who I am, with all this dramatic talk about dishonoring my ancestors and breaking blood bonds. I answered him with just one sentence: "What's your move-in date?" He never replied. The family Facebook group went dead silent too. All those posts about duty and respect just vanished into thin air. It's funny how that works. By Friday, all the phone calls had stopped. Either people figured out they'd been fed a story or they realized I wasn't backing down. Either way, the harassment campaign ended just as quickly as it started. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one last call to make. I called Adrian directly on Friday afternoon. He picked up right away, like he'd been waiting for my call. "Bran, what the hell did you send to everyone?" he asked. I told him the truth. He shot back, "You got a problem with that?" I said, "You're making the whole family look bad." We went back and forth for about 10 minutes. He tried every angle: how Mom and Dad needed help, how I was being selfish, how families should stick together, all the same stuff I'd been hearing all week. Finally, I cut straight to the point. "Adrian, you've got their money. You figure out their housing," I said, then hung up and waited to see what would happen next. It didn't take long. The first sign something was off came from my cousin Sophie. She's pretty much the only family member who stayed neutral during all this, probably because she's got her own drama to handle and doesn't have time for more. She texted me one random Tuesday afternoon, "Hey, did you know Adrian is having trouble with his penthouse purchase?" I hadn't heard anything myself, but honestly, it didn't surprise me. Funding a $1.3 million apartment when you've never really had a stable job can be pretty tricky. What kind of problems? I replied. She told me that the bank was asking for employment verification and proof of income, stuff Adrian clearly couldn't produce. No kidding, Sherlock. Turns out banks actually want to see real proof you can pay back those huge loans. Who would have thought? Sophie didn't have all the details, but over the next few weeks, the story started coming out through the family grapevine. Apparently, the bank had initially pre-approved Adrian based on my parents' down payment and some projections about his consulting gig. But when it was time for final approval, they wanted actual documents, pay stubs, tax returns, bank statements, the kind of paperwork that proves you're not just some deadbeat planning to live beyond your means. The problem was Adrian didn't have any of that stuff because he doesn't really earn any money. His consulting business is basically him calling himself an entrepreneur and meeting with people for coffee now and then to talk about opportunities, no clients, no contracts, no income coming in, just a website he paid someone to set up and some business cards. The bank just laughed him out of their office. Without that loan approval, he couldn't buy the penthouse. Without buying the penthouse, he wouldn't get his deposit back. And that deposit was a big chunk of my parents' house money. But it gets better, wait for it. Adrian and Clara had been planning this huge wedding. We're talking over 200 guests, a fancy venue, open bar, the whole 9 yards. Because when you're living off your parents' retirement savings, why not go all out? The venue wanted the final payment 2 weeks before the wedding day. Adrian called my parents asking if they could cover it since they'd already invested so much in his future. My parents had to tell him they'd given him everything they had and were barely scraping by in a 1-bedroom apartment. So Adrian started reaching out to other family members for loans, that is, loans he never intended to pay back. Hey, I'm just short on the wedding venue payment. Could you help me out? It's just temporary until my business picks up. I even got a text from him myself, Bran, I know we've had our issues in the past, but I really need your help with paying for the venue, it's only $15,000. Just $15,000, which is honestly a drop in the bucket. I didn't even bother replying when I saw the message. Turns out, nobody else responded either because the venue ended up canceling their reservation 3 days before the wedding date. They simply told us the space was no longer available since the payment hadn't gone through. As a result, Clara's backyard became the makeshift ceremony site. Because of that last-minute change, about half the guests decided not to come at all, and the rest just spent the whole time whispering about what a mess it was. Sophie told me Clara was crying through most of the reception, upset because her perfect vision for the day had been wrecked, and she felt it wasn't turning out like she'd imagined. Meanwhile, that same week, I closed on my third property, an investment I'd been eyeing for months, a small commercial building that needed some work but had real potential. The previous owner was eager to sell, and I managed to get it for around $40,000 below what it was worth on the market. My plan is to fix it up and either flip it or rent it out as a commercial space, just another project in my portfolio. I posted a simple photo on Instagram showing the keys and paperwork, casually mentioning that it's another step in my business journey. Sometimes patience really does pay off. It was nothing fancy, just an ordinary update for friends and family. A few relatives liked the post, but I noticed my parents didn't bother to respond or like it. And just when I thought the story was over, my parents were about to make one last, desperate move. Last Saturday morning, I was sitting in our kitchen having coffee with Melissa, talking about baby names and looking at paint swatches for the nursery walls. Peaceful, simple morning. Exactly what I'd been craving, a quiet family moment. Suddenly, our Ring doorbell started going off like crazy. I looked at my phone and saw my parents standing on our porch. They were dressed nice, both of them, Mom holding a bouquet of flowers and what looked like a grocery bag, Dad wearing that weird forced smile as if he was trying to sell me something. They were talking directly into the camera as if it was a video call. Brandon, we know you're home, my mom said in this overly sweet voice. We can see your car in the driveway. I glanced at Melissa, she was already shaking her head, knowing what this was about. My dad added, holding up the grocery bag, we brought some groceries to cook for you, your mother wants to make that pot roast you used to love. It was honestly incredible how manipulative they were. They showed up uninvited with props meant to guilt me, flowers and food, as if this was some normal family visit instead of another attempt to push past my boundaries. They'd clearly planned this. They knew I didn't want them there, and yet they still showed up with this whole act. My mom continued talking straight to the camera, saying, "We've been thinking about everything that happened," as if they genuinely cared. "We made some mistakes," she went on. "We should have asked your permission before renting that house," she admitted, though it was 8 months too late for that apology. I sat inside, just watching this whole performance unfold on my phone from about 20 feet away, completely stunned by how bold they were. After months of harassment, manipulation, and trying to mess up my business relationships, they somehow believed they could just show up with flowers and fix everything like nothing had happened. Melissa looked at me with a mix of concern and frustration, like, "Please tell me you're not falling for this again." I told her I wasn't answering the door but knew they weren't gonna give up that easily. They stood there for about 10 minutes, taking turns talking into the camera, saying how sorry they were and how much they missed me, and at one point, my mom even started crying, doing her typical victim routine she's perfected over the years. When it became clear I wasn't opening up, my dad's tone changed. "Brandon, this is just ridiculous. We're your parents, please open the door so we can talk like adults." That's when I finally made up my mind. I called the police non-emergency line to report trespassing. I explained that there were people on my property refusing to leave and that I had an existing incident report involving them before. The dispatcher handled it professionally, asked whether I felt threatened or if they were trying to break in, standard questions. I told her they were my parents but that I had specifically asked them not to come over, and they'd already harassed tenants at another property I own. They assured me an officer would be dispatched, and surprisingly, they responded pretty quickly. About 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. I watched through the window as a young officer got out of his car and approached my parents. They were animated, especially my dad, who was probably trying to explain this whole thing as a family misunderstanding. My mom still held those damn flowers like they proved her good intentions. The officer listened patiently and then pressed the doorbell button. "Sir, this is Officer Grant with the police department. Could you come to the door, please?" I stepped outside and explained everything: previous harassment of tenants, repeated demands for access to my property, months of family pressure and manipulation, all that mess. I showed him the incident report number from the situation at the rental house, and Officer Grant handled it with complete reasonableness. "Do you want them to leave your property?" "Yes," I responded. "Have you asked them multiple times to leave and not come back?" He then went back over to my parents and had another talk. This time, I could hear my dad raising his voice. "This is our son's house. We have a right to visit our own child," he said. "Sir, your son has asked you to leave his property, and you need to respect that. This is getting ridiculous. We're family, I get that it's a family matter, but property rights still matter. You need to get off the property now." My mom started crying again, but the officer wasn't swayed. He was polite but firm in his tone. They packed up their flowers and groceries and left my property then. After that, Officer Grant came back to speak with me. He recommended I document everything thoroughly and consider filing for a restraining order if they keep showing up uninvited. Sometimes, people need official paperwork to really understand that no means no. On Monday morning, I called my lawyer and explained everything that had happened. He told me I had solid grounds for a restraining order, especially considering the previous incident with my tenants. We filed all the paperwork that same afternoon, attaching all the documentation I'd been keeping for the past 8 months. The court hearing was set for the following week. I half expected my parents to argue or fight it, but they didn't even show up. The judge granted the restraining order without any fuss, setting a 200-yard distance rule. That means they can't come within 200 yards of my house, my business, or my rental property. If they violate it, they'll be arrested on the spot. Also, I changed my phone number that week and only gave it to people I truly trust. Since then, peace and quiet have been incredible. No more manipulative calls, no more guilt trips, no more surprise visits. It's just me, my pregnant wife, and our normal life, simple and peaceful. 3 weeks went by with this calm before the next chaos started. I was at the workshop when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but it was local, so I answered, thinking it might be a new potential client. "Hi, is this Brandon? I'm calling about the investment opportunity your brother mentioned to me last month." I froze immediately. "Wait, what investment opportunity? The rental property portfolio? Adrian told me you guys were partners in some real estate business and were looking for private investors." My stomach dropped. "Can you hold on a second?" I stepped outside the workshop to find a quiet spot. "Sir, please tell me exactly what my brother told you." Turns out, this guy Owen had met Adrian at some networking event downtown. Adrian had introduced himself as a co-owner of a successful property management company and showed Owen photos on his phone of their holdings, their portfolio. Those photos included my houses, my rental properties, even my personal home, and the new commercial building I just bought. Adrian had been roaming around town claiming he owned half of my business. He told Owen that you guys had 3 income-generating properties and were looking to grow further. Then he asked if I'd be interested in investing $25,000 for a stake in their next purchase. $25,000, serious money. This wasn't some small-time scam, it was outright fraud. "Did you give him any money?" I asked. "I gave him $5,000 as a deposit while I thought about making the full investment. He said it would secure my spot in the deal." I felt sick reading that. "Owen, I need to tell you something important. I don't have a business partner. I own those properties outright, myself. My brother has never invested a cent in anything related to my business or properties." There was silence on the line for a moment. "Are you saying he scammed me?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And you're probably not the only one he's pulled this on." I got Owen's contact info and promised I'd call him back soon. Then I did something I probably should have done months ago. I googled my brother's name along with my business name. The results made my stomach turn. There were profiles on business networks where Adrian listed himself as co-founder of my company. A LinkedIn page claimed he was a partner and investment coordinator for my real estate business. There was even a Facebook business page he created using my company's name, with himself listed as the main contact. This piece of shit had been impersonating me for months. I started making calls, first to my lawyer to get advice, then to Owen to gather more details about what Adrian had told him and what kind of proof he might have. Owen sent me screenshots of their text conversations. He even sent me a fake contract with letterhead that looked suspiciously similar to my real documents. The worst part was how Adrian had been using my reputation to make his scam seem legit, telling people they could verify his claims by driving past the properties or looking up ownership records. But those properties were real, they just belonged to me, not him. My lawyer's advice was clear: document everything thoroughly and report it to the police immediately. This isn't just a family squabble, it's clear-cut identity theft and fraud. That night, I sat down with Melissa and laid out everything I'd discovered, showing her all the evidence I'd collected. I told her this situation was now way beyond normal family drama. He's literally stealing my identity to scam people out of their money. The next morning, I called the police and filed a report for fraud. I took all the proof with me, screenshots of Owen's messages, the fake business profiles, everything I could find. When the detective assigned to the case saw the full extent of Adrian's actions, he actually seemed pretty interested. Detective Harris told me, "We deal with a lot of family money disputes, but this case is on a whole different level." He explained that my brother had been running a scam using my identity and assets. They immediately launched an investigation, but I wasn't done yet. I had a plan that I thought might work better. So, I called Owen back with an idea. "What if we set up a meeting with Adrian? Let him believe you're ready to invest the full $25,000, and I'll show up unexpectedly." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown. Owen texted Adrian saying he was prepared to move forward with the investment and wanted to finalize the paperwork. Adrian responded right away, probably because he was desperate for money, agreeing without hesitation. I got there early and chose a corner table where I could see everything but wouldn't be obvious when Adrian arrived. He showed up right on time, carrying a folder that likely had more fake documents inside. Owen handled it perfectly, he played his part well. "So," I said to Adrian, "tell me more about how the partnership with your brother works." Adrian smoothly replied, "Oh, Brandon takes care of the daily property management, but I'm in charge of investor relations and new acquisitions." He added that they had a solid system in place and that Adrian's brother was okay with bringing in outside investors. I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. This guy was doubling down on his lies even as he was about to get caught. "Actually," Owen chimed in, "I'd love to meet Brandon and hear his side of things directly." That made Adrian a little uneasy. "He's pretty busy with the properties right now," Adrian said nervously. "Maybe we can arrange something later." That's when I stood up and walked over to their table. The look on Adrian's face was priceless, panic-stricken, like he'd just seen a ghost. His jaw actually dropped open. "Hey, partner," I said casually as I sat next to Owen. "Owen here was just telling me about this investment opportunity you two have been talking about." Adrian started stammering immediately. "Bran, I can explain, please, let me explain," he begged. I looked at him skeptically. "I'm really curious about this so-called business partnership you forgot to mention," I said calmly. Meanwhile, Owen was recording everything on his phone, which we'd agreed on beforehand, to have solid evidence for the police report. Adrian couldn't even put together coherent sentences anymore. "You thought you could steal my identity and defraud people using my properties as collateral," I said slowly, "is that what you believed?" The quiet coffee shop was starting to notice our intense conversation. Adrian glanced nervously around, probably realizing how bad things looked. I pressed on, "Just so we're clear, I've never had a business partner. I built this company all by myself, without any help from my family. My brother here has never invested in real estate nor owns any part of my business." Owen nodded in agreement. "So when he took your $5,000, that was fraud?" Adrian finally managed to say. "Look, I was going to pay him back, I just needed some time," he insisted. "Here's what's about to happen," I told him, "you're going to give Owen his money back right now. You're going to take down all those fake business profiles you made, and you better pray that the police go easy on you when I file charges first thing Monday morning." He looked surprised and said, "You wouldn't call the cops on your own brother?" "Wrong move." "Watch me," I responded calmly, pulling out my phone. "Actually," I said loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, "let's just call them now." Adrian's face went pale, he started begging me not to involve the police, promising he'd fix everything and claiming it was all a big misunderstanding, same excuses he'd been using forever. But I'd had enough of enabling him. I dialed 911 right there in the coffee shop. "I need to report a fraud in progress, the suspect is here with me now," I told the dispatcher. About 20 minutes later, 2 patrol officers arrived on the scene. I explained everything and showed them the evidence, screenshots, fake profiles, everything. They arrested Adrian immediately for fraud and identity theft. The last thing he muttered as they put him into the patrol car was, "Mom and Dad are going to hear about this." I looked at him and said, "Good. Maybe now they'll finally see what kind of person they've been covering for all these years." Eventually, Owen got his $5,000 back, turns out Adrian still had most of it in his checking account. But the criminal charges stuck anyway. My brother ended up pleading guilty to avoid jail time but received 2 years probation and was ordered to pay restitution to his other victims, because Owen wasn't the only one he scammed. The investigation revealed that Adrian had deceived at least 6 other people, scamming them out of smaller sums of money. In total, the damages added up to nearly $40,000. When my parents learned about the arrest, they lost it completely, focusing their anger not just on Adrian for his criminal behavior but also blaming me for breaking up the family. 6 months down the line, Adrian and Clara ended their marriage in divorce. She moved back to her home state and even took his last name off her social media profiles. The last I heard, Adrian was working at a call center and living alone in a small studio apartment across town. The craziest part is how much my life improved once I decided to cut out all that toxic family drama. My business is doing really well now, and Melissa's pregnancy is going smoothly. Sometimes, you have to choose between holding on to peace or protecting your sanity. I went with my sanity, and honestly, I've never been happier.